The plane was cruising at a steady altitude, the gentle hum of the engines blending with the faint chatter of passengers settling into their journey. Outside, the sky stretched endlessly, a calm canvas of blue punctuated only by distant clouds drifting lazily across the horizon. Inside the cabin, there was the usual rhythm of travel, the soft clinking of trays, muffled conversations, and the occasional laughter of children unaware of the miles they had already traversed. The flight attendants moved with practiced ease down the aisles, checking on passengers, adjusting overhead bins, and offering smiles that spoke of routine professionalism. The pilot, stationed at the cockpit, scanned the instruments with the practiced eyes of someone who had spent thousands of hours in the air. Every dial, every digital readout, every subtle vibration of the controls spoke a language of patterns, deviations, and necessary corrections. For the most part, it was uneventful, almost mundane, but in aviation, even the mundane requires absolute attention. And then, in the blink of an eye, the routine shattered. A red light flashed sharply on the console, accompanied by a shrill warning tone that cut through the cockpit with a sense of urgency. The landing gear had failed. The words echoed in the pilot's mind, not as panic, but as a clear statement of fact. At 200 miles per hour, with hundreds of lives on board, the situation demanded immediate action. Yet, even in that split second of realization, the pilot's training, experience, and presence of mind held firm. There was no room for fear, no luxury of hesitation. Panic might have overtaken anyone else, but not him. He took a deep breath, felt the steady rhythm of his own pulse, and began to evaluate every option with clinical precision. The cockpit became a hive of concentrated activity. His co-pilot leaned in, eyes wide but composed, awaiting instructions, ready to act. The pilot's voice, calm and controlled, issued directions with deliberate clarity. First, they would confirm the failure. Every indicator, every mechanical report, every backup system had to be cross-checked. The landing gear, the critical component that should have extended effortlessly to allow a safe landing, refused to respond. The hydraulics were malfunctioning, and the auxiliary systems were showing conflicting readings. It was a scenario no pilot wants to encounter, yet here it was. He methodically ran through the emergency checklist, each step a potential lifeline. Check pressure levels, attempt manual override, engage alternate systems. Every option that could bring the metal frame and its fragile passengers safely back to the ground was considered. Meanwhile, the cabin crew sensed something unusual. The subtle tension in the cockpit was palpable, even through the insulated layers of metal and soundproofing. They moved swiftly, preparing the passengers for an unexpected ordeal. The pilot activated the cabin announcement system, his voice calm but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a technical issue with the landing gear. Please remain seated, fasten your seatbelts, and follow the instructions of the crew. We are trained for this and will guide you through safely." The words, though unnerving, carried a tone of assurance. The passengers felt the first prickles of fear, but the composure of the pilot and crew injected a thread of hope into the uncertainty. The minutes stretched, each one heavy with anticipation. The plane continued to glide through the sky, cutting through clouds as the pilot weighed every variable. Wind speed, altitude, fuel reserves, runway length, angle of approach, all factors in a complex equation that determined the difference between disaster and survival. He consulted with air traffic control, a calm but urgent dialogue that coordinated the emergency landing procedure. The airport personnel on the ground moved quickly, preparing emergency vehicles, clearing the runway, and readying every available resource. It was a coordinated ballet of urgency, each participant aware that timing and precision were the difference between catastrophe and survival. Inside the cockpit, the pilot considered the landing strategy. A normal landing involved the gear absorbing impact, stabilizing the aircraft, and slowing it to a halt. Without the landing gear, the plane would have to touch down on its fuselage, a maneuver fraught with danger. He knew that any miscalculation could rip the plane apart or set it on fire. At 200 miles per hour, every second counted. He calculated the descent trajectory meticulously, factoring in every gust of wind and every micro-adjustment of the controls. The co-pilot monitored instruments, ready to assist, mirroring every movement with precise synchronicity. They had done drills for emergencies before, but no simulation could ever fully replicate the tension of a real-life scenario with lives at stake. In the cabin, passengers felt the plane begin its descent. The engines hummed differently now, a deeper, more intense vibration that made the plane shudder ever so slightly. Some passengers gripped their armrests, knuckles white, while others closed their eyes, whispering prayers. Children clung to parents, sensing the tension in the air. The crew moved with quiet efficiency, instructing everyone to brace for impact, covering heads, and keeping calm. The pilot's voice occasionally came over the intercom, a steady guide through the storm of fear. He explained what was happening, reassured them of the steps being taken, and reminded them to trust the training and expertise of everyone on board. As the runway approached, the pilot initiated the final phase of the landing. The plane tilted carefully, touching down on the underside of the fuselage first. Sparks flew as metal scraped against asphalt, a harsh reminder of the gravity of the situation. Smoke rose from friction, the smell of burning rubber and metal filling the cabin momentarily, but the pilot's focus never wavered. He used the engines, reverse thrust to slow the aircraft, keeping it aligned with the runway. Every correction was measured, precise, and necessary. The co-pilot called out each adjustment, their teamwork a testament to hours of practice and instinctive understanding. Time seemed both suspended and accelerated in those crucial moments. The plane skidded along the runway, bouncing slightly on uneven contact points, yet remained structurally sound. Outside, emergency vehicles flanked the runway, ready to intervene at the slightest sign of trouble. Inside, passengers held their breath, some praying silently, others gripping loved ones, all feeling the enormity of what was unfolding. The pilot's calm determination was the anchor that kept chaos from erupting. Every decision, every micro-adjustment, had been made with one goal: to bring every soul on board home safely. Finally, after what felt like an eternity compressed into minutes, the plane came to a gradual halt. The engines whined down, the brakes released, and silence swept over the cabin. Then, cautiously, a cheer arose, hesitant at first and then growing louder as passengers realized they had survived. The crew moved through the aisles, checking on everyone, offering reassurance and guiding them toward safety. The pilot exhaled deeply, his hands still gripping the controls, aware that the ordeal was over but knowing that the impact of the event would linger in everyone's minds for years to come. The landing gear failure had been catastrophic in potential, but through skill, calm, and unwavering focus, disaster had been averted. Emergency responders met the plane on the tarmac, ready to provide assistance if needed, though it was clear that no intervention would be necessary beyond the precautions already in place. Passengers disembarked slowly, hugs and tears shared freely, gratitude pouring out for the pilot whose quick thinking had saved every life on board. The plane, though scratched and bearing the marks of its risky landing, remained intact, a testament to engineering and human skill working together under extreme pressure. As the sun set over the horizon, casting golden light across the tarmac, the pilot stepped out of the cockpit briefly, allowing himself a moment of reflection. Hundreds of lives had been entrusted to him, and he had delivered them safely. The fear and tension of earlier were replaced with a quiet satisfaction, a recognition that training, composure, and courage could turn a near tragedy into a story of survival. Passengers would carry the memory of that flight with them forever, speaking of the calm pilot, the crew who guided them, and the extraordinary circumstances that tested them all. In the following days, the story spread across news channels and social media, inspiring awe and respect. Experts analyzed the footage, praising the pilot's extraordinary skill and decision-making. Families recounted the emotions, the fear, and ultimately, the relief. Yet beyond the headlines and reports, the most enduring truth remained in the hearts of those who had been on that plane. A moment of crisis had been met with unwavering courage, and because of it, every life had been saved. It was a reminder of the delicate balance between danger and safety, fear and composure, chaos and control. It was also a testament to human resilience, to the ability of one person to make the difference between disaster and survival. And so, the plane rested on the runway, engines quiet, the sky above slowly darkening into night. Inside, passengers shared stories, comforted one another, and slowly began to process the ordeal. Outside, emergency vehicles pulled away, the runway returned to its normal rhythm, and life continued, as it always does, marked forever by one extraordinary moment when courage and skill prevailed at 200 miles per hour. The pilot, once again alone in the cockpit, reflected quietly on the flight, aware that training, experience, and calm judgment had made all the difference. It was a day that would be remembered, not for the fear that had surged, but for the bravery that had guided them safely to the ground. The moment the pilot realized the landing gear had failed, he knew that every second counted. At 200 miles per hour, with hundreds of lives on board, there was no room for hesitation or panic. He took a deep breath, focusing entirely on the procedures drilled into him over countless hours of training. The cockpit was alive with activity, the hum of engines blending with the rapid beeping of warning systems, but his mind remained clear and methodical. He turned to his co-pilot, who mirrored his concentration, eyes scanning the instruments, ready to follow instructions without question. "We need to prepare for an emergency landing," he said in a voice calm but firm, the kind that demanded attention and inspired confidence. The co-pilot nodded, taking immediate steps to confirm the failure, running through checklists and attempting to verify all backup systems. Every indicator was carefully cross-checked, every emergency protocol mentally visualized before action was taken. Outside, the sun shimmered on the wings, a stark contrast to the tension inside the cockpit, where the fate of hundreds hung in the balance. The pilot activated the cabin intercom, his voice steady, measured, and professional. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are experiencing a technical issue with the landing gear. Please remain calm, fasten your seatbelts, and follow the instructions of the cabin crew. We are trained for situations like this, and your safety is our top priority." Even as the words flowed, he could hear the faint hum of concern ripple through the cabin. Some passengers glanced nervously around at one another, while others gripped their armrests tightly. A few children cried softly, their parents whispering reassurances, trying to mask their own fear. The cabin crew immediately sprang into action, moving with purpose and efficiency, directing passengers to secure themselves, offering calming words, and preparing the cabin for the imminent landing. The atmosphere was thick with tension, yet the pilot's controlled tone and methodical instructions created a fragile sense of order amidst uncertainty. Every move was deliberate. The co-pilot assisted with monitoring systems, relaying data and confirming that all available emergency measures were in place. The autopilot was disengaged, giving the pilot full control of the aircraft, allowing him to make every adjustment with precision. He knew that any miscalculation could have catastrophic consequences. Every gust of wind, every slight shift in altitude or speed, had to be accounted for. He calculated approach angles, speed adjustments, and runway distances in real time, constantly balancing the aircraft against the unforgiving laws of physics. Outside the cockpit, clouds drifted lazily, indifferent to the drama unfolding inside the plane. Passengers were largely unaware of the technical intricacies, but they felt the tension nonetheless, a subtle vibration through the seats, the sharper hum of the engines as adjustments were made. The crew moved like clockwork, demonstrating the value of training and teamwork. Flight attendants approached passengers individually, ensuring seatbelts were fastened tightly, securing loose items, and explaining the brace position. Some passengers were visibly terrified, clutching the armrests or holding the hands of loved ones. The crew's calm, authoritative presence provided a beacon of reassurance, a reminder that there was a plan and that their safety was the priority. Each instruction, repeated patiently and clearly, was a small anchor in a sea of uncertainty. The pilot remained in constant communication with air traffic control, coordinating a landing approach and ensuring that emergency services were ready and waiting on the runway. Every step of the way was meticulously calculated, every contingency accounted for. As the aircraft began its descent, the pilot adjusted the controls gradually, maintaining stability and avoiding any sudden shifts that could unsettle the passengers or worsen the situation. The plane descended steadily, wings level, engines responding to subtle inputs, the nose slightly tilted to manage airspeed and balance. The pilot's hands moved with practiced precision, each motion smooth, deliberate, and essential. He was acutely aware of the fragility of the situation. Landing without functioning gear was inherently dangerous, and he had to ensure that the aircraft remained as stable as possible until touchdown. Each passing second felt elongated, stretched by the weight of responsibility and the awareness that hundreds of lives depended on his skill and focus. Inside the cabin, the tension was palpable, a mix of fear, anticipation, and hope. Passengers whispered quietly, some praying silently, some holding each other tightly. The children, sensing their parents' anxiety, clung closely, eyes wide with a mix of curiosity and fear. Flight attendants continued their rounds, offering reassurance and guiding passengers to brace positions, their voices steady, calm, and purposeful. The pilot's announcement had set the tone, but it was the crew's actions that reinforced it, a living demonstration that trained professionals were in control, even in the face of potential disaster. The runway approached rapidly. The pilot began the final approach, carefully aligning the aircraft with the centerline, managing airspeed, and adjusting descent rate to account for the lack of landing gear. Every movement was precise, every calculation made in real time. He had to maintain perfect balance, controlling the plane's momentum and trajectory, ensuring that it would touch down as safely as possible. Sparks from minor contact with the fuselage would inevitably occur, and the risk of structural damage was real, but the pilot's focus never wavered. His eyes were fixed on the runway, his mind entirely absorbed in executing a perfect landing under extraordinary circumstances. As the aircraft touched down, the friction of the fuselage against the runway created a shower of sparks and smoke, a frightening spectacle for passengers who had been bracing for impact. The pilots skillfully used reverse thrust from the engines to slow the plane, maintaining directional control despite the reduced stability from the missing landing gear. The co-pilot called out adjustments and monitored speed, supporting the captain's every move. The aircraft skidded along the runway, bouncing slightly on contact points, yet the pilot's careful management prevented a loss of control. Emergency vehicles flanked the runway, ready to respond, but the pilot's skill rendered their immediate intervention unnecessary. The plane gradually slowed, the engines whining as they released reverse thrust, and finally came to a complete halt. A collective sigh of relief swept through the cabin, followed by tentative applause that grew as passengers realized that disaster had been averted. Flight attendants moved swiftly through the aisles, checking on passengers, assisting the elderly and injured, and preparing everyone for safe disembarkation. Outside, the runway was already cleared of other traffic, emergency vehicles standing by but no longer needed immediately. The pilot allowed himself a brief moment to relax his grip on the controls, the tension in his shoulders easing as he confirmed that every passenger was safe. In the aftermath, the passengers began to process the event. Conversations bubbled up, recounting the fear and the relief, praising the skill of the pilot and the composure of the crew. Children clung to parents, some tears streaming down faces, while adults embraced one another, the raw emotion of survival washing over them. The cabin crew, though tired and shaken, maintained professionalism, guiding everyone toward the exits and ensuring that all safety procedures were followed. The pilot, reflecting quietly in the cockpit, recognized that the training, experience, and calm focus had made the difference. Every decision, every maneuver, had been executed with one goal: to bring everyone home safely. News of the landing spread quickly, capturing the attention of media and aviation experts alike. Analysts dissected the pilot's actions, praising his rapid assessment, precise decision-making, and unshakable composure. Social media was filled with stories from passengers recounting the ordeal, describing the tension, the fear, and ultimately, the relief that followed the successful landing. The pilot, however, remained modest, focused not on accolades but on the knowledge that every life had been saved. For him, the reward was in seeing the passengers disembark safely, knowing that training, preparation, and calm judgment had prevented tragedy. The event became a testament to human skill and resilience, a story that inspired countless others. Aviation professionals studied the incident, integrating lessons learned into training programs to ensure that future pilots could handle similar emergencies with the same calm precision. Passengers carried the memory with them, sharing it as a story of courage, professionalism, and the incredible skill required to safely navigate one of the most harrowing situations imaginable. The successful landing demonstrated that even in the most critical circumstances, human expertise, careful preparation, and calm decision-making could avert disaster and save lives. In the quiet moments that followed, as the runway lights reflected off the fuselage and emergency vehicles returned to their stations, the pilot allowed himself to acknowledge the gravity of what had just occurred. Hundreds of lives had depended entirely on his ability to remain calm, focused, and precise under extraordinary pressure. The knowledge that each passenger, crew member, and child was safe provided a profound sense of relief and accomplishment. It was a stark reminder that in aviation, as in life, preparation, skill, and composure could transform a potentially catastrophic situation into a triumph of human capability. As night fell over the airport, the plane sat still on the tarmac, its engines quiet, its passengers safe, and its crew weary but relieved. The world would remember this flight not for the danger, but for the remarkable way it had been handled. Every element of training, experience, and human judgment had converged to ensure that disaster had been avoided. Passengers, crew, and pilots alike would carry the memory forever, a testament to the extraordinary outcomes that were possible when fear was met with calm, preparation, and courage. The successful handling of the emergency landing underscored the delicate balance between risk and control, chaos and order, and reminded everyone involved that lives could be saved through skillful, measured, and decisive action. The story of the landing spread far beyond the airport, inspiring confidence in aviation safety and respect for the professionals who dedicate their lives to mastering the skies. Families recounted the experience, acknowledging the pilot's unflinching focus and the crew's calm efficiency. The passengers, once gripped by fear, now carried with them a renewed appreciation for the expertise that had guided them safely to the ground. The plane itself, though bearing the marks of the emergency landing, remained a symbol of resilience and careful planning. And in the cockpit, the pilot reflected quietly, knowing that his training, experience, and the composure of his team had made all the difference. Every instruction, every maneuver, every carefully calculated adjustment had saved lives, turning a moment of crisis into a testament to human skill, courage, and determination. The moment the pilot realized the landing gear had failed, a surge of adrenaline would have been natural, but he had long trained himself to replace instinctive panic with methodical action. At 200 miles per hour, hundreds of lives hung in the balance, and every decision mattered. He immediately scanned the cockpit, eyes darting across instruments, gauges, and warning lights, processing information with a focus sharpened by years of experience. The red alert blinked insistently, a stark symbol of the danger, but in that symbol, he saw clarity rather than chaos. Each piece of data told him something vital. The hydraulic system had failed, the backup mechanisms were partially compromised, and the plane's balance and structural integrity were now entirely dependent on controlled maneuvers. He ran through the emergency checklist in his mind, step by step, a silent mantra to ensure no action was overlooked. Every lever, every button, every system had to be checked, verified, and prepared for the impending descent. His co-pilot mirrored his intensity, working in tandem with him, confirming readings, monitoring fuel levels, and calculating descent trajectory. The cockpit became a small island of calm precision amid the tension that was surely beginning to ripple through the cabin. The pilot's mind raced through countless scenarios, simulating every possible outcome, weighing risks, and preparing contingency plans. He knew that a controlled landing without functioning gear was inherently dangerous, but he also knew that hesitation or uncertainty could be far more deadly. He had to rely on the plane's remaining systems, his own knowledge of aerodynamics, and the instincts honed by years of flying under both ordinary and extraordinary circumstances. The cabin, though largely unaware of the intricate calculations taking place, began to feel the tension. Passengers were seated, some staring silently at the walls, others whispering hurried prayers. The flight attendants moved with practiced calm, ensuring everyone's seatbelt was fastened and that the brace positions were explained and demonstrated. The captain's earlier announcements had established a sense of trust, and now the crew reinforced it through actions rather than words. Each movement, checking a latch, securing a tray table, confirming that loose items were stowed, was deliberate, purposeful, and designed to maximize safety. The cabin became a space of organized anticipation, a stark contrast to the potential chaos outside. In the cockpit, the pilot's mind operated on multiple levels simultaneously. He monitored airspeed, altitude, and engine output while cross-referencing emergency protocols, all while visualizing the landing procedure. He considered the approach angle, the runway length, wind conditions, and the plane's weight distribution, knowing that even a minor miscalculation could result in a catastrophe. He calculated the glide slope meticulously, planning for a descent that would allow the aircraft to make the longest, most controlled contact possible, maximizing stability without the landing gear. He prepared for friction-induced sparks and potential fuselage damage, understanding that while the plane could survive these forces, every variable had to be managed precisely. Every second felt elongated, stretched by the weight of responsibility. The co-pilot continuously relayed readings, offering support and confirming each action, creating a synchronized effort that resembled a complex dance performed at high speed and extreme stakes. The autopilot remained disengaged, giving the pilot direct control of the aircraft, every adjustment reflecting his judgment and intuition. He considered tireless variables: turbulence, slight shifts in wind speed, micro-adjustments to the aircraft's angle, the impact of engine thrust modifications, and how every factor would influence the final touchdown. In his mind, each calculation intersected with human lives, giving every decision an amplified significance. As the plane descended, the pilot began small, deliberate maneuvers to stabilize the aircraft for the controlled landing. He communicated constantly with air traffic control, informing them of his intended procedure, ensuring that emergency crews were in position, and requesting any adjustments necessary to secure a safe landing corridor. Emergency vehicles lined the runway, lights flashing, personnel ready to respond to any complication, but the pilot's focus remained entirely on the precise execution of the landing itself. There was no room for distraction. Every thought, every action, was directed toward controlling the aircraft under conditions that no commercial flight crew would ever hope to experience in normal circumstances. Inside the cabin, passengers were acutely aware of subtle shifts. The plane's vibrations changed slightly as the descent began, the engines responding differently to adjustments in thrust, the angle of approach producing an unfamiliar sensation in their stomachs. Some passengers closed their eyes tightly, others held hands with family members, but nearly everyone listened intently to the instructions of the crew. The calm authority of the flight attendants reassured passengers, translating the precision and expertise of the cockpit into clear, actionable steps for those who could do nothing but brace. The pilot initiated a series of controlled maneuvers designed to reduce speed gradually while maintaining altitude, ensuring that the aircraft's descent would align with the prepared approach path. He managed the flaps, throttle, and stabilizers with meticulous care, understanding how each adjustment would affect lift, drag, and overall control. The plane's remaining systems were pushed to their limits, but his mastery of the aircraft allowed him to exploit every ounce of stability and reliability built into its design. He visualized the runway in advance, calculating exactly where contact would occur, preparing the fuselage for the inevitable scraping and sparks that would accompany a gearless landing. Every microsecond of movement was considered, every adjustment premeditated. The co-pilot continuously monitored structural stress levels, relaying information on engine performance, angle of descent, and airspeed. Together, they created a dynamic feedback loop, a high-stakes communication that merged data, intuition, and instinct. The captain's hands and mind were one with the plane, each motion calculated to maintain equilibrium. Passengers could feel the intensity, a collective awareness building, a silent recognition of both fear and hope. Children clung to parents, older passengers gripped armrests, and the flight attendants continued their careful rounds, reinforcing the importance of safety and compliance, all while the cockpit executed the most delicate maneuver imaginable. As the runway drew closer, the pilot prepared for the final approach. The plane's nose was carefully raised to optimize the angle of descent, the engines throttled with precision to control speed while preventing instability. The co-pilot confirmed the alignment with runway markers and provided real-time feedback on altitude, angle, and momentum. Outside the plane, emergency responders watched intently, knowing that while their presence was a precaution, the skill of the pilot was the true determinant of outcome. The aircraft's descent was smooth despite the underlying danger, a testament to the combination of engineering excellence and human expertise. The landing itself was a controlled descent. Onto the fuselage, sparks erupted as the plane made contact with the asphalt, smoke trailing as metal scraped against the runway, yet the pilot maintained composure, using engine thrust and a precise series of corrections to keep the aircraft aligned and slowing. Every micro-adjustment mattered. Too little pressure on the controls could allow the plane to veer, too much could cause structural damage or loss of control. The co-pilot read aloud critical data, confirming each adjustment and providing an additional layer of monitoring that ensured the landing proceeded as smoothly as the circumstances allowed. Inside, passengers braced for impact, eyes wide and hearts racing, yet the calm authority of the flight attendants and the captain's steady voice offered a lifeline of reassurance. The aircraft skidded along the runway, each second a mix of friction, heat, and controlled chaos. The pilot used reverse thrust strategically, slowing the plane incrementally, maintaining balance despite the absence of landing gear, and avoiding sudden shifts that could jeopardize structural integrity. Sparks continued to fly, smoke curled upward, and passengers clutched each other tightly, yet the pilot's control never wavered. Every decision he made, every adjustment he implemented, directly contributed to the preservation of life on board. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity compressed into moments, the plane came to a complete stop. The engines idled down, and silence swept over the cabin, punctuated by tentative cheers and the quiet sobs of relief. Passengers began to exhale, some embracing family members, some looking around in disbelief at the fact that they had survived. Flight attendants moved swiftly, checking on passengers, offering water, and ensuring that everyone remained calm as the plane was secured. Emergency vehicles approached cautiously, ready to assist if necessary, but it was clear that the pilot's skill had rendered immediate intervention unnecessary. The successful landing became a story of extraordinary precision, courage, and expertise. Aviation professionals hailed the pilot's actions, analyzing the emergency landing as a textbook example of skill under pressure. Passengers recounted the experience in vivid detail, describing the fear, tension, and ultimately the relief of arriving safely on the tarmac. Families shared stories of the ordeal, emphasizing the pilot's calm voice and the crew's professional guidance as critical factors in survival. The aircraft itself, bearing the marks of the emergency landing, became a symbol of resilience, human skill, and the effectiveness of training under extreme conditions. In the aftermath, the pilot reflected on the experience, aware of the fine line between disaster and survival. The controlled landing, executed with careful precision, had saved hundreds of lives. The stress, the tension, and the danger had been overwhelming, yet every calculation, adjustment, and decision had contributed to the positive outcome. Passengers would carry the memory of this flight forever, inspired by the professionalism and courage displayed by those at the helm. The landing reinforced the critical importance of training, preparation, and composure in the face of emergencies. It reminded everyone involved that even when circumstances seem impossible, expertise, focus, and calm decision-making can avert disaster and preserve life. As the plane rested on the runway, engines quiet, passengers safe, and crew relieved, the story of the controlled landing spread beyond the airport. News outlets covered the event, social media buzzed with accounts from passengers, and aviation experts analyzed every detail, praising the skill and judgment of the pilot. The pilot, however, remained humble, recognizing that his actions had been part of a coordinated effort that included the co-pilot, the cabin crew, and emergency responders. Together, they had transformed a potentially catastrophic event into a demonstration of human capability and resilience. The successful outcome highlighted the delicate balance between danger and control, fear and composure, chaos and order. It served as a testament to the power of preparation, the value of experience, and the importance of remaining calm under pressure. The passengers, having experienced fear and uncertainty firsthand, now carried with them a story of survival and courage. The pilot's quick assessment of the situation, coupled with his reliance on remaining systems and precise control, had ensured that everyone on board survived to tell the tale. The aircraft, once a vessel of potential disaster, had become a symbol of the remarkable outcomes that are possible when skill and courage meet crisis head-on. As the runway came into view, a strip of asphalt stretching across the landscape like a lifeline, the pilot's focus sharpened to a level where every second, every movement, and every adjustment mattered. He could see the lights flickering along the edges, the reflective markers indicating the precise path along which he needed to guide the aircraft. The plane, a massive combination of metal and engineering, responded to his touch with the delicate balance of inertia and control, and he knew that the final moments would demand the entirety of his skill. At 200 miles per hour, the difference between a controlled landing and disaster was measured in mere feet and fractions of seconds. Every fiber of his attention, honed over years of training and experience, was engaged in managing speed, altitude, alignment, and the precise angle of approach. The co-pilot remained vigilant, assisting with calculations, confirming readings, and providing a steady voice that mirrored the captain's calm and unwavering determination. The cabin, tense and silent in anticipation, felt the subtle shifts of the aircraft as it prepared for contact with the runway. Passengers braced instinctively, many gripping armrests, holding the hands of loved ones, or whispering prayers under their breath. Flight attendants moved among them with a careful balance of authority and reassurance, repeating instructions to brace and remain calm, every word calculated to reduce panic and encourage compliance. The passengers could sense the extraordinary concentration in the cockpit through the crew's calm demeanor, yet they also felt the heightened vibration and hum of the engines as adjustments were made. Every movement inside and outside the cabin resonated with the understanding that the final touchdown would be extraordinary in its danger and in the precision required to survive it. The pilot made subtle adjustments to the throttle and control surfaces, carefully managing lift and drag. The plane's nose was lifted slightly to ensure that the fuselage would make controlled contact with the runway first, allowing friction to slow the aircraft gradually without causing catastrophic loss of balance. The co-pilot monitored instruments, providing continuous feedback on speed, altitude, angle, and distance to the runway. Emergency vehicles lined the runway, lights flashing, personnel ready to respond, but the real action depended entirely on the pilot's ability to execute a controlled landing with near-perfect timing. He had visualized the scenario countless times in training, but now it was real, tangible, and infinitely more consequential than any simulation. As the aircraft descended, small adjustments were made continuously. The engine's thrust was modified in micro-increments to maintain speed and balance, flaps were positioned to optimize lift and stability, and rudder inputs countered the slightest drift caused by crosswinds. The plane shuddered slightly as it encountered subtle turbulence, but the pilot's hands responded instinctively, countering every movement to maintain a level approach. He calculated the precise point at which the fuselage would make contact, knowing that touching down too early or too late could compromise the aircraft's structural integrity. Every calculation was instant, every decision executed without hesitation, a reflection of the depth of his experience and the focus that allowed calm to prevail over fear. In the cabin, passengers felt every nuance of motion. The subtle deceleration, the vibrations underfoot, and the shifting sounds of engines adjusting to the final descent all contributed to a palpable tension. Some passengers whispered to themselves, others clung to their neighbors, but most followed the instructions of the flight attendants, their calm demeanor acting as a conduit of reassurance. The cabin crew repeated brace positions, encouraged passengers to stay seated, and reinforced the importance of remaining calm. Their presence was the bridge between the high-stakes precision in the cockpit and the people experiencing the landing firsthand. Every movement, every word, was part of a carefully orchestrated effort to preserve lives. The runway drew nearer with each passing second. The pilot adjusted the pitch and roll of the aircraft, aligning it perfectly with the centerline while balancing speed to prevent skidding or loss of control. Sparks began to appear as the fuselage first made contact with the asphalt, small bursts of fire and smoke rising from friction between metal and ground. The pilot remained entirely composed, countering every minute movement to ensure the plane did not veer off course. The co-pilot provided constant updates, calling out distance markers, angles, and speed, a real-time stream of information that allowed for fine-tuned corrections. The engine's reverse thrust was gradually engaged, carefully slowing the plane without causing destabilizing shocks. Time stretched and compressed simultaneously, a paradox of perception common in high-stress situations. Each second felt both agonizingly long and impossibly short. The plane skidded along the runway, bouncing slightly as friction absorbed the kinetic energy of the descent. The pilot adjusted the controls continuously, balancing weight distribution and torque, ensuring that every segment of the aircraft made contact as designed to avoid tipping or loss of structural integrity. Emergency vehicles flanked the plane, their flashing lights reflecting on the fuselage, a vivid reminder that, while prepared for intervention, survival depended entirely on the pilot's skill. The co-pilot relayed structural stress readings, engine output, and approach data, reinforcing the captain's decision-making and providing redundancy for critical calculations. Each spark that flew from friction was noted but not alarming. It was expected, a natural consequence of landing without functional gear. The pilot's hands and mind were completely synchronized with the aircraft, each adjustment made with confidence, precision, and anticipation of the plane's response. Every vibration, every shift, and every sound was interpreted instantaneously to guide the landing toward a successful conclusion. In the cabin, the passengers' tension was at its peak. Children squeezed their parents' hands, adults whispered prayers, and the crew moved deliberately, providing verbal reassurances and ensuring that everyone maintained the brace position. The sounds of scraping metal and friction created a surreal backdrop, yet the passengers trusted, consciously or unconsciously, in the professionalism of those controlling the aircraft. The pilot's prior announcements, the crew's calm behavior, and the orchestrated preparations had created a fragile but vital sense of control and safety within the chaos of the emergency landing. As the plane continued its controlled skid along the runway, minor adjustments were made in response to vibrations, friction, and wind resistance. The pilot applied gentle rudder and aileron corrections, ensuring that the aircraft remained aligned with the centerline. Sparks from the fuselage became more pronounced as the plane slowed, yet there was no panic, only calculated precision. The engines, reverse thrust and braking systems were used strategically to manage deceleration, maintaining balance while absorbing the residual energy of the landing. The pilot's mind remained fully engaged, monitoring every variable, anticipating the plane's response to each input, and adjusting in real time to guarantee the maximum chance of a safe outcome. Gradually, the plane slowed further, friction diminishing as the speed decreased. The pilot continued to maintain balance and alignment, countering any minor deviation from the intended path. The co-pilot monitored critical systems, confirming stability and coordinating with emergency personnel to ensure a seamless conclusion to the landing. The runway, once a distant goal, was now fully beneath the plane, the lights reflecting off the fuselage, providing continuous visual feedback to guide every final adjustment. The aircraft, though scraping along the ground, remained intact, a testament to both engineering and the pilot's exceptional skill. Inside the cabin, passengers began to register a growing sense of relief as the plane's motion stabilized and speed decreased. Some opened their eyes, others whispered words of thanks, and all recognized, at least instinctively, that they were witnessing a feat of extraordinary competence. The cabin crew continued to provide reassurance and guidance, preparing for safe disembarkation and monitoring the passengers for signs of distress. The harmony between cockpit precision and cabin management ensured that every element of the landing was executed safely and efficiently. Finally, after an extended and tense skid, the aircraft came to a complete stop. Engines idled down, brakes released, and silence settled over the cabin, punctuated by tentative sighs, claps, and emotional expressions of relief. The passengers, overwhelmed with emotion, began to embrace one another, tears mingling with laughter as the realization of survival sank in. Flight attendants moved quickly through the aisles, checking on passengers, assisting the elderly and children, and providing support as everyone disembarked safely. Emergency vehicles, though ready, remained in support mode rather than active intervention, a testament to the pilot's precise execution of the controlled landing. News of the landing spread immediately, capturing the attention of media outlets, aviation experts, and social media alike. The pilot's incredible skill, calm under pressure, and precise management of the emergency were analyzed and celebrated. Passengers shared vivid accounts of the tension, fear, and ultimate relief of surviving a landing without functional gear. Families recounted the bravery and composure of the crew, praising their professionalism and the captain's decisive actions. The plane itself, though bearing the marks of friction and scraping, stood as a symbol of engineering excellence and the extraordinary capabilities of those trained to respond in crises. The pilot, reflecting quietly after the event, understood the gravity of what had transpired. Hundreds of lives had depended entirely on his expertise, composure, and ability to act decisively under extreme pressure. Every adjustment, every maneuver, every calculation had contributed to the preservation of life. Passengers would remember the event forever, inspired by the courage and precision that had allowed them to survive. For the pilot and co-pilot, it was also a testament to preparation, skill, and the ability to execute a plan flawlessly in circumstances where failure could have been catastrophic. The successful landing became a case study in aviation circles, analyzed for the extraordinary coordination between pilot, co-pilot, and crew, as well as the mechanical resilience of the aircraft. Experts highlighted the delicate balance between human skill and machine capability, emphasizing the importance of training, calm decision-making, and experience in ensuring the safe conclusion of emergency situations. Passengers carried the story with them, telling it repeatedly as a remarkable example of how composure, expertise, and teamwork could turn what might have been a tragedy into a story of survival. As the night fell over the airport, the plane rested on the tarmac, engines quiet, passengers safely disembarked, and emergency crews standing down. The runway, once a scene of intense tension, returned to its normal rhythm, now a silent witness to the extraordinary skill and courage displayed. The pilot reflected on the event, aware that this landing was more than a technical achievement, it was a human triumph, demonstrating the power of focus, preparation, and calm under pressure. Every passenger, crew member, and child aboard had survived because of decisions made in a high-stakes environment, decisions executed with precision, experience, and courage. The story of the landing spread, inspiring awe and respect, reminding the world that even in moments of extreme danger, skill, determination, and calm judgment could ensure that life prevailed. As the plane finally came to a complete stop on the tarmac, a wave of relief and disbelief washed over everyone on board. Cheers erupted from passengers who had been moments earlier gripped by fear, tears mingling with laughter as the reality sank in. They had survived an emergency landing that, mere minutes before, had seemed almost impossible. The cabin, once tense and silent, now hummed with the raw energy of relief and gratitude. People clung to one another, embracing loved ones, crying openly, some with silent tears that streaked their faces, others laughing in shock and incredulity. Children peeked over seats, wide-eyed, sensing the profound emotional release in the cabin while trying to understand what had just happened. The flight attendants, who had remained calm and composed throughout the ordeal, finally allowed themselves a moment of emotional release, exchanging relieved smiles and soft words of encouragement with passengers who were still trembling. The crew moved efficiently, checking on each passenger individually, making sure that no one had been injured during the high-stakes landing, guiding everyone to remain seated until emergency personnel had secured the aircraft. The disciplined professionalism of the cabin crew throughout the crisis had played a crucial role in maintaining calm, and now it shone even brighter in their composed management of the aftermath. The pilot, still seated in the cockpit, allowed himself a brief but profound exhale, feeling the culmination of tension, calculation, and instinct finally released. For the past tense-filled moments, every decision he had made had been a critical link in a chain that could either result in disaster or survival. He reflected on the precision of his maneuvers, the exactness required to balance speed, altitude, and structural integrity, and the tireless focus on executing a controlled landing without functional landing gear. His hands, resting briefly on the controls, were steady, though his mind still raced through the sequence of events, reviewing every decision, every adjustment, every calculation. In those minutes, the full weight of responsibility he bore became profoundly real. Hundreds of lives had been entrusted entirely to him and his co-pilot, and through skill, experience, and calm judgment, every single person aboard had survived. The sense of accomplishment was tempered by humility, for he understood that survival was the result not only of his expertise but also of the seamless coordination of the entire flight crew and the mechanical reliability of the aircraft itself. Emergency personnel approached the plane cautiously, lights flashing, equipment ready for immediate intervention. The runway, lined with fire trucks and paramedics, had been prepared for the possibility of catastrophe, but their presence now served as a reassurance rather than a necessity. The pilot coordinated with ground control, confirming that all passengers were accounted for and that the aircraft remained stable. As each passenger unbuckled seatbelts and prepared to disembark, a sense of surreal normalcy slowly returned. Families gathered their belongings, some still clinging to one another, whispering words of relief and gratitude, while others simply sat in quiet awe at the narrow margin between danger and safety that had just occurred. The flight attendants remained at the forefront, leading passengers through the aisles, maintaining order and calm even in the heightened emotional environment. They instructed everyone carefully, ensuring that exits were approached safely, checking for any injuries or signs of trauma, and reminding passengers to remain calm despite the adrenaline surging through their bodies. As passengers began to leave the plane, the reactions were varied yet deeply human. Some cried openly, the tension and fear of the past moments pouring out as emotion they had held back in the cabin. Others laughed in disbelief, incredulous at the fact that what should have been a disaster had transformed into a story of survival. Conversations bubbled immediately, fragmented by the need to express relief, recount what they had felt in the cockpit, or to simply touch base with loved ones nearby. Each story was infused with a sense of awe at the pilot's skill, the co-pilot's support, and the professionalism of the crew who had guided everyone through a situation that seemed nearly insurmountable. Strangers embraced in the aisles, sharing the collective relief that had bonded them in a shared experience of fear and survival. Children, sensing the overwhelming relief of adults, hugged parents tightly, their eyes wide with curiosity, attempting to process the intensity of what they had just witnessed. The pilot stepped out of the cockpit briefly, acknowledging the applause and gratitude from passengers who had gathered in the aisles. His face, composed but weary, reflected both relief and a deep sense of responsibility fulfilled. He offered nods of acknowledgement and words of reassurance, though his humility prevented overt celebration. He was keenly aware that while the landing had been a demonstration of skill and calm under pressure, the survival of every passenger and crew member was a collective achievement. The coordinated effort of the cabin crew, the cooperation of the passengers, the precision of his co-pilot, and the readiness of emergency personnel on the ground had all contributed to this miraculous outcome. As he returned to the cockpit to complete final checks and secure the aircraft, he allowed himself a quiet moment to reflect on the enormity of what had been accomplished. News crews began to arrive, capturing footage of passengers disembarking and documenting the scene of what was hailed as a near-miraculous survival. Journalists interviewed passengers, crew, and emergency responders, seeking to capture the emotional and technical magnitude of the event. Across social media, images and stories quickly spread, conveying a tale of heroism, calm under pressure, and the extraordinary competence of those entrusted with lives in moments of extreme crisis. Aviation experts dissected every aspect of the landing, praising the pilot's calculated approach, the co-pilot's vigilance, and the cabin crew's exceptional professionalism. Analysts highlighted the critical importance of communication, coordination, and quick decision-making under pressure, noting that the outcome was as much about preparation and teamwork as it was about individual skill. Passengers, many still processing the experience, shared their stories with friends, family, and strangers alike. Each retelling emphasized the tension of the moments before touchdown, the surreal experience of the aircraft skidding along the runway, and the ultimate relief as safety was finally secured. The narrative was one of hope, skill, and the remarkable resilience of human beings in the face of extreme stress. Children recounted the frightening moments with the innocence of youth, often focusing on the sparks and smoke from the plane's fuselage, while adults emphasized the calm authority of the crew and the captain, crediting their survival to the decisiveness and expertise that had guided the aircraft to safety. The physical aftermath of the landing revealed the intense forces at play. The fuselage bore scratches and marks from scraping against the runway, smoke had lingered briefly within the cabin, and the tires and braking systems had endured the immense friction of an emergency stop. Yet the structural integrity of the plane remained intact, a testament to engineering excellence, maintenance diligence, and the skilled handling of the aircraft by the captain. Every passenger and crew member had emerged unscathed, which only magnified the sense of awe and gratitude that permeated the air. The realization that a situation so dire had been averted through competence, training, and composure inspired profound respect among all who had witnessed it. In the hours that followed, passengers gathered their belongings and were escorted safely off the runway to waiting transportation and medical personnel for precautionary checks. The pilot and co-pilot completed post-landing procedures, documenting every action, analyzing every minute of the landing, and ensuring that the aircraft was fully secured. Emergency personnel remained on standby until it was clear that no further intervention was required. The event, though concluded, would leave lasting impressions on every individual involved, a story that would be recounted with emotion and admiration for years to come. Families reunited in heartfelt embraces, expressing gratitude to one another and to the professionals who had guided them through the ordeal. Some passengers, overcome by emotion, spoke directly to the flight crew, tears of relief streaming as they thanked them for their composure, skill, and courage. Others quietly reflected on the fragility of life, the thin line between disaster and survival, and the extraordinary series of events that had transformed a potential tragedy into a moment of collective triumph. Each person carried with them a renewed appreciation for the expertise and dedication required to ensure safety in aviation, a recognition of the human skill that could transform danger into safety through calm, decisive action. The pilot's reputation quickly grew as a result of the landing. Aviation authorities, news agencies, and social media highlighted the event as an extraordinary example of skill under pressure. Analysts reviewed flight data, praising his rapid assessment of the situation, the precise maneuvers executed, and the coordination with both the co-pilot and the cabin crew. The story became a symbol of hope and competence, demonstrating the importance of training, calm under pressure, and careful decision-making in life or death situations. The passengers, for their part, would recount the experience repeatedly, emphasizing the calm, professional leadership of the captain and the crew, who had made the difference between survival and catastrophe. As the day turned into night, the plane remained on the tarmac, a symbol of resilience and human capability. The runway, once a stage of extreme tension, now reflected a story of survival, skill, and extraordinary courage. Passengers, crew, and emergency responders alike reflected on the day, carrying with them the memory of fear transformed into relief, danger into triumph. The pilot, finally able to rest, reflected on the magnitude of the event, recognizing that while the landing had been perilous, it had also been a demonstration of human skill, teamwork, and the profound impact of calm, precise decision-making in moments of crisis. In the weeks and months that followed, the story spread far and wide, inspiring awe and respect for those who had performed under extreme pressure. Passengers recounted their experiences to family and friends, sharing the fear, tension, and relief that had characterized the flight. The pilot's actions were cited in training programs, aviation courses, and discussions of emergency preparedness, emphasizing the critical importance of focus, composure, and skill in averting disaster. The event became a case study in heroism, preparation, and the extraordinary capabilities of trained professionals when confronted with situations that seemed almost insurmountable. Ultimately, the landing was remembered not for the sparks, the friction, or the danger, but for the lives saved, the composure maintained, and the extraordinary skill demonstrated. Every passenger and crew member who had boarded that plane walked away with a profound appreciation for the professionalism and courage that had guided them to safety. The pilot, co-pilot, and cabin crew were celebrated not just for their technical ability, but for their humanity, the calm, decisive, and caring response that turned a potential disaster into a miraculous escape. The story stood as a testament to human skill, resilience, and the capacity to remain calm and focused when confronted with extraordinary danger, inspiring countless others and leaving an indelible mark on everyone involved.